Chief Executive John Lee opens new transportation link in Chengquan-o. Jimmy Lai jailed for over 5 years for breaching leasing contract terms. And President Xi Jinping further improves cooperation with Arab countries. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The Chengquan-o Lam-Tin Tunnel and Cross Bay Link will open for traffic tomorrow morning, shortening the journey time between Lohas Park and Kwun Tong by 20 minutes. Chief Executive John Lee attended the officiating ceremony today.
This morning, Chief Executive John Lee and transport officials went to the Chengquan-o Lam-Tin Tunnel to listen to a briefing about the project's construction. They then took a bus ride from the tunnel to Cross Bay Link. Lee praised the design, which includes a cycling path on the bridge so that cyclists can enjoy the view. They then went back to the Chengquan-o exit of the tunnel to officiate the ceremony. The structure has a total length of about 3.8 kilometers, about 2.2 kilometers of which comprise of tunnel, which adopted the design of a dual two-lane highway. The entrance in Lam-Tin directly connects the Eastern Harbour Crossing, while the entrance in Chengquan-o connects with Chengquan-o Town Centre, Lohas Park and Chengquan-o Industrial Estate. John Lee hails the fact that the facility is free, and after it enters into service, residents travelling between Lohas Park and Kwun Tong can save up to 20 minutes during peak hours. He went on to say that residents in Chengquan-o will be able to leave home later and get back home earlier to spend more time with their families, describing it as a true blessing. Meanwhile, starting Monday, 5 new franchised bus routes will provide services via the Chengquan-o Lam-Tin Tunnel in morning and evening peak times during weekdays. Meanwhile, Secretary for Transport and Logistics Lam Sai-hung wrote in his blog that traffic jams are expected during the first stage of the opening of the new infrastructure. He said according to previous experience, many motorists would be curious to try out the new route or initially to at least familiarize themselves with the route. Still, he's confident the new routes can improve traffic within the district in the long run.
The chief executive said he was already in discussion with mainland counterparts about relaxing anti-COVID measures. He believes quarantine-free cross-border travels with the mainland will happen next year. The comments were made during the celebration of the 5th anniversary of the Hong Kong News Expo. John Lee was among the officiating guests and attended a seminar there. Speaking of the new 10 rules announced by the mainland, Lee said there was plenty of room for discussion and hopefully he can bring some positive news. He added negotiations included increasing the quotas for quarantine hotels on the mainland, but stressed the relaxation process has to be gradual. Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai and a former executive of the now-defunct Nix Digital, Wong Wai-Keung, were sentenced to jail for 69 months and 21 months respectively for breaching the leasing terms of Apple Daily's headquarters. Lai is also serving jail time for other convicted crimes. Christy Khan has more.
Founder of the now-defunct Nix Digital, Jimmy Lai, was escorted to the district court by prison vehicle this morning. He was found guilty on 2 counts of fraud charges for concealing the operations of a consultancy firm, Legal Consultants Limited, from the landlord of Apple Daily newspaper headquarters, Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation. The other defendant, Wong Wai-Keung, a former executive of Nix Digital, was convicted of 1 count of fraud. District Court Judge Stanley Chan said Lai had played a significant role in the case. He noted that the consultants had covertly operating at the newspaper's headquarters in Chengquan-o while paying a low rent for around 2 decades. As a result, the judge believed Lai had gained intangible benefits. Furthermore, he said Lai had been using the media organization as a form of protection so that the landlord could not carry out an investigation against the firm. Chan also said Lai had no remorse, noting that the defendant had blamed his chief operating officer for the offense, emphasizing that he wasn't involved in the firm's daily operations. The duo was sentenced to 5 years and 9 months and 21 months respectively. The court also handed out an 8-year ban on Lai from holding company directorship. Additionally, the media tycoon was ordered to pay a $2 million fine for the offense. During the hearing, the judge reiterated that the case was a simple fraud case and should not be interpreted politically. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The city reported 14,377 new coronavirus cases, slightly higher than yesterday. There were more than 13,600 local infections involving 35 care homes for the elderly and the disabled. 25 schools identified outbreaks. 21 more patients died, bringing the death toll in this pandemic wave to 10,722. Pediatricians are calling on parents to get their children vaccinated as soon as possible, as pediatric wards in the city are getting full. They fear more children will contract the virus as winter comes, adding chances of infected children being admitted to intensive care unit are high. Meanwhile, Secretary for Labour and Welfare Chris Sun is undergoing quarantine after coming down with COVID. China logged over 13,000 COVID cases today, about 3,000 less than yesterday's tally. In Beijing, footfall across a number of shopping malls was less than expected. That despite being the first weekend after the government greatly reduced its strict COVID curbs. This man said he was worried of being infected because cases are climbing in Beijing. The capital city reported over 2,000 new cases, with Guangzhou province having the highest number of infections, over 2,900. Meanwhile, there has been a resurgence of online tributes to Li Wenliang, a whistleblower doctor from Wuhan who died of COVID. Li was remembered for alerting authorities of a new SARS-like virus during the onset of the pandemic. President Xi Jinping has concluded his visit to Saudi Arabia and is returning home. He spent a hectic Friday attending a number of meetings to help strengthen ties with Arab nations. Xi attended the first China-Arab States Summit in Riyadh before taking part in the inaugural China Gulf Cooperation Council Summit. Nazvi Karim reports.
This is the Yanbu Aramco Sinopec refining company on Saudi Arabia's western coast of the Red Sea. Jointly established by Chinese petrochemical giant Sinopec and Saudi powerhouse Aramco 6 years ago, the two countries hold up this project as a model example of energy cooperation between China and the Arab world. And with President Xi Jinping meeting Arab leaders in Saudi Arabia this week, more partnerships in finance, energy, technology and investments are on the horizon. Xi was in Riyadh to attend the China-Arab States Summit and a summit of Gulf Cooperation Council or GCC countries. The first China-Arab States Summit was held on Friday, featuring the leaders of 21 Arab nations from the Middle East and Africa. The summit issued the Riyadh Declaration of the first China-Arab States Summit, in which China and Arab states agreed to make all-out efforts to build the China-Arab community with a shared future in the new era. Xi delivered a keynote speech, pointing out that China and the Arab world have enjoyed a long history of friendship via the ancient Silk Road. He said they have all emerged from struggles for national liberation, adding that solidarity, mutual assistance and trust were distinct features of their relationships. The president also attended the first China GCC summit, holding talks with the leaders of the 6 countries in the bloc: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain and Oman. Xi said China's vast consumer market and expansive industrial system is a perfect complement to the energy-rich GCC's desire to diversify its economic development and move into new industries. In addition, Xi held separate meetings with the leaders of Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, Djibouti, Lebanon, Algeria and other Arab states in Riyadh, vowing to import more oil and natural gas from the region. Xi also vowed that China would not interfere in their internal affairs, while urging Arab countries to conduct energy transactions in Chinese yuan. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
The United States has imposed a series of sanctions on persons and entities over alleged rights abuses and other issues. Among those targeted including Chinese nationals, Russia's Central Election Commission and Iranian officials. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The U.S. Treasury Department said it imposed sanctions on Chinese nationals Li Zhenyu and Qiu Xinrong and 10 entities linked to the two. This included Nasdaq-listed Pingtan Marine Enterprise over what Washington says are human rights abuses tied to China-based illegal fishing. The designation of PME marks the first time the U.S. has imposed sanctions on an entity listed on the Nasdaq stock exchange. Washington also targeted 157 China-flagged fishing vessels linked to the sanctioned entities. China says it is a responsible fishing country that has been cooperating internationally to clamp down on illegal fishing, and that it fishes in relevant exclusive economic zones according to bilateral agreements. Beijing's embassy in Washington, D.C. condemned the U.S. for pointing fingers at other countries and imposing unilateral sanctions under the pretext of human rights. The U.S. Treasury also designated 40 individuals and entities connected to alleged human rights abuse or corruption across 9 countries, including Russia, China, and Iran. Meanwhile, Washington imposed sanctions on Russia's Central Election Commission. The White House accused the body of helping to oversee and monitor what it called sham referendums held in Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. The U.S. Treasury also took action against 4 people it accused of being directly involved in Russia's filtration operations. The U.S. State Department designated 2 Russian nationals over alleged human rights abuses against Ukrainian civilians. Russia has denied the allegations and accused Ukraine and its backers in the West of a smear campaign. Friday's action also imposed sanctions on Iranian officials over Tehran's recent crackdown on women's rights protesters. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Development Secretary defends rule changes to speed up land creation. Basketball superstar arrives in Florida after prisoner swap between the US and Russia. And with Christmas coming, Ukraine is part of Nativity. Welcome back to TVB News. Earlier this week, the Development Bureau proposed streamlining the city's land development procedures in order to help shorten the time for turning plots of land into spade-ready sites for housing developments. Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin today said the proposal will not undermine the power of the Legislative Council. Christy Khan reports.
The proposal submitted by the Development Bureau highlighted the authorities can resume private land for public purposes if it is approved by the Executive Council. This means that various development-related statutory procedures can be carried out before funding is approved by the Legislative Council's Finance Committee. Speaking to reporters after a radio program, Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin said the changes will not undermine LegCo.
I truly believe that our streamlined proposals will not preempt the power of the Legislative Council in terms of whether or not we should proceed with a particular development project. Normally, LegCo members, if they really do not want the government to proceed with a certain development project requiring resumption, they will actually voice out their concerns years before we proceed to that stage of seeking funding approval.
She added that the proposed amendments will ensure procedural justice and will not erode public participation. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau and the Agency for Volunteer Service co-organized the first Hong Kong Volunteer Award this year. The award ceremony was held in the Convention and Exhibition Centre, with Chief Secretary for Administration Eric Chan among the guests. The award is to recognise the contributions and achievements of volunteers, volunteer groups, corporations and organisations. In Chan's opening remarks, he extended his gratitude to volunteers who had been playing a pivotal role in the fight against COVID, such as by delivering anti-COVID packs to households. Overseas, hundreds of people marched in Manila today to protest what they say is a rising number of extrajudicial killings and other injustices under Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The demonstrators, led by the rights groups Alliance Karapatan, gathered at a public square in the capital before marching towards the presidential palace to demand justice for victims. Police estimated around 800 protesters took part in the rally, which coincided with International Human Rights Day. Protest organizers say they have documented cases of at least 17 extrajudicial killings under Marcos's counter-insurgency campaign. They say 828 political prisoners have been detained as of November 30th, with at least 25 of them arrested after Marcos took office in June. After a high-profile prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Russia, women's basketball superstar Brittany Griner has landed in Texas. She was exchanged for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout, but critics say the prisoner swap is setting a dangerous precedent. This report from NBC News.
Tonight, Brittany Griner is back in the U.S., touching down in Texas, where military doctors will check her physical and mental health, and reunited with her wife Sherelle after 294 days in Russian captivity, the last month spent in a harsh penal colony. The WNBA and NBA celebrating the return of the seven-time All-Star known as BG.
We are glad that she's home. We're glad that she's reunited with her family.
Brittany could return to the court in the future after 10 months in prison, without good nutrition, without exercise, without physical fitness.
While, of course, we're all hopeful, but first and foremost, what's important is that she's feeling good and that she's back with her family.
While in Moscow, Russia's notorious arms dealer Victor Bout's homecoming was broadcast live on state media. Vladimir Putin taking a victory lap today. Our new exchange is possible. Yes, everything is possible, he says. Nicknamed the Merchant of Death, Bout had served 11 years of a 25-year sentence in the U.S. on multiple charges, including conspiring to kill Americans, before he was caught running a global network of cargo planes delivering arms to terrorists around the world, including $50 million of weapons to the Taliban, and a plan to sell surface-to-air missiles, guns, and drones to Colombian rebels. Could he again become a threat to America?
I do believe that Putin and the Russians are hoping that Mr. Bout is going to be able to restart some of these activities.
Which is why some Republicans say he should never have been sent home.
It was a dangerous concession to Vladimir Putin, and it will set a dangerous precedent going forward.
The president promises to keep pressing to free another American the U.S. says is wrongfully jailed in Russia, businessman and former Marine Paul Whelan. But these negotiations have not included American teacher Mark Fogel, like Griner, arrested at a Moscow airport, possessing 17 grams of marijuana, he says for chronic back pain, more than Griner had. How do you feel about the U.S. government?
I'm a bit disenchanted with them at times. I feel like they have not given us a straight story.
The U.S. says Russia is looking to Iran once again to resupply the Russian military with drones and surface-to-surface missiles as Moscow continues its invasion of Ukraine.
Iran is providing Russia with drones for use on the battlefield in Ukraine, drones that are being used to kill innocent Ukrainian people and destroy civilian infrastructure. In exchange, Russia is offering Iran an unprecedented level of military and technical support that is transforming their relationship into a full-fledged defense partnership. So I think it's important for us to be clear. This partnership poses a threat not just to Ukraine, but to Iran's neighbors in the region.
Concerns about further weapon sales to Russia come after Iran sold hundreds of attack drones to the country over the summer. U.S. President Joe Biden's administration recently unveiled sanctions against Iranian firms and entities involved in the transfer of such drones. In October, the White House accused Tehran of sending Iranian troops to Crimea to support Russian drone attacks, which were targeted at Ukraine's power stations and other key infrastructure. The war in Ukraine is among the themes at the Vatican's traditional nativity display this year. Running until January the 8th, 2023, it hopes to send a sign of peace and hope for the people of Ukraine.
The nativity is a sign of peace, and all of us, looking all the nativities that are present, are called to be instrument of peace. We cannot forget also that we start the exhibition with the Ukrainian nativity, but at the end there is another one. And the message is very simple. We cannot forget, during the passage between one nativity and the other, that at the end is still the war. And it's still for us the responsibility to build peace.
The 100 nativity scenes in the Vatican exhibit depicts the Christmas story in over 100 different ways, with scenes created by artists and contributors from all over the world. Baby Jesus lies in a manger inside a damaged building among the ruins of a Ukrainian city. His mother Mary and Joseph stand beside him as armed soldiers and local residents look on. Other scenes show baby Jesus sheltering in a structure reminiscent of the Azovstal steel plant in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol. That's the news. Thanks for watching.